Hello Year 12, welcome to the first part of the annotations of Preludes. Again, I want to thank Miss Kang for all of her annotations that are written all over the poem. As I said previously, we did this together where I discussed the poems to a previous class and Miss Kang annotated it in front of them on the camera. So her writing, as you know, is much neater than mine, so we do thank her very much for that. And as you can see, just looking at how busy that page is, there is a lot going on in there. So to start off with, the poem Preludes was written in around sometime between October 1910 and November 1911, and it was published in 1915. So we're talking about a poem that has been written and revised at around the same time as the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock and Rhapsody on a Windy Night. So we can see the three of them coming from the same time period, and it was, like the other two, written in the days where Eliot was in Paris. And if you remember from what we've studied in class, Eliot grew up in America, and he often, as he was getting ready for the university years and starting off at university, would wander the streets at night, quite struck by what he was seeing at night. And as you know from what we've discussed in class, there is that one critic who says that in these younger years he saw death in life. Everywhere he looked, he saw debaucherism, the decay, homelessness, and this bowing down to capitalism, if you will. And it was when we get to Journey of the Magi, when we get to do that poem, is when you see that transformation where he started to see life in death and started to realize he came to terms with his Christianity. Although even when we look at that poem, you'll see that there are question marks there as well. So like some of his other poems, this particular poem gives us a really strong sense of the ideas of stagnation and desolation of modern reality. So this barrenness of morality, spirituality, intellectualism, intellectuality, I think is a better word there, and almost a morbidity to everything. It's definitely about the destruction of identity and of the individual as well. And it, like the other poems, it uses the mundanity and monotony and futile meaningless of the existence of society. So just as in Prufrock and Rhapsody, we do have this structure of a dramatic monologue. We have this idea of a persona telling us a story. There is a narrative to it, and it's an individual talking, and yet it's not about the individual. It is about society in itself and that alienation. We do have the segregation of the natural world that has trapped individuals, and the idea that they're unable to escape the inevitability of monotony. Now, looking at the structure of the poem, the title itself is a musical term. We've had the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, a musical term, then Preludes, a musical term, and then we move into Rhapsody on a Windy Night, which is also a musical term. And don't forget, we have the musical motifs that flow through these poems as well. And so we have this particular musical term, Preludes, that is commonly defined as a short musical composition of one theme, especially an introduction to a longer piece. Now, one of the critics that we look at it in class says that this particular poem is an antithesis to the Preludes of Chopin, in that it shows the grim reality of city life. And one of the things we've got to ask is this a short composition? It's definitely one of the shorter poems that we're studying structurally and in length. But what's the longer piece it introduces? What is it that is he actually introducing the longer piece? Or is it left alone, stagnant like everything else? The poem's divided into 4 stanzas, and the first stanza is written in tetrameter verse. There is a dominance of the number 4 in the style, particularly in stanza 1 as well. And you'll have a look, I'll see if I can zoom in on this for you. You'll see that Miss Kang has highlighted several words there to create the lexical chains. And I urge you, when you are going through the poem, to find those lexical chains, those words of cohesion when something is so fragmented. And so we have this idea that, we've got the winter evening, 6 o'clock, now, lamps, morning, moving down, early, time, and it goes on, waited, night, thousand, or, and so on. And these lexical chains link us to Prufrock. They create the sense of time. They give us the fact that we're in winter. Don't forget, Prufrock is in autumn. Now we're in winter. It's the end of the day, and time is moving on throughout the poem, just as time moves on in Prufrock as well. Then you have the other lexical chains, the blue words here: burnt out, lonely, vacant, trampled, masquerades, one, and so on throughout the poem as it goes down through. So we have edge, trampled again. It's interesting that trampled comes in twice, and vacant lots again, that comes in twice as well. It's a repeated word. And these words give us a sense of isolation and that loneliness that we were talking about. Then you also have the words that have been highlighted in red. I'll go in on these again for you. The stamps: faint, stale, muddy, sordid, which means dirty, yellow, soiled, fade, blackened, suffering. And so with our words, our lexical chain that's in red, we get that sense of decay and dirtiness that comes through. Sorry, I went in a little bit too far for you then. Sorry, you 12. So there's a sense of something broken. The atmosphere is quite dark, and there's a depravity to it all that comes through with those lexical chains. But let's have a look at stanza 1. The winter evening settles down with smell of steaks in passageways. 6 o'clock. The burnt out ends of smoky days, and now gusty, I'm going to start reading that for you again, so we can zoom in on it a bit more so you can see it a bit better. The winter evening settles down with smell of steaks in passageways. 6 o'clock. The burnt out ends of smoky days, and now a gusty shower wraps the grimy scraps of withered leaves about your feet and newspapers from vacant lots. The showers beat on broken blinds and chimney pots, and at the corner of the street a lonely cab horse steams and stamps. And then the lighting of the lamps. So we start in evening, we start in winter. It's arguably the fourth part of the day and the fourth season. So in terms of the day, it's morning, noon, afternoon and evening, and we're now in the evening. And winter is the fourth season. So we have that structure in the time that matches the structure of the poem. Then we have those interesting lines of the winter evening settles down. The personification of it and the imagery that's created is quite weighted and almost doomsday-like. It could also mean the idea of settling down, coming to stay, making it your home. Then we have the 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock is a quarter of the day remains, and so that pattern of 4 is continuing through. It's quite a concrete time given, and this concrete time is reflected in Rhapsody as well, which starts 12 o'clock. Montgomery, one of the critics that we've read, argues that past, present and future coincide at this moment. There is an emptiness to the singular 6 o'clock. It creates an empty timelessness about it. It's just sitting there by itself in that line. Note the use of the simple present tense in now and now, gusty shower wraps. It normally needs to have the present progressive tense when it's written there, but it's written in the simple present tense. So time just keeps moving on, and we're constantly in this moment. Also note the use of the word street throughout the poem, the repetitive nature of it. The repetitive nature of this particular word, this noun, creates an ordinary scene of no particular place. Some critics suggest that it means homelessness even. We also have a romantic tone to the first line. Remember, Eliot often spoke about the Romanticist poems, and modernism is born out of that literary movement, and there is this romantic nature to it as the winter evening settles down. And then that shifts very suddenly to a more prosaic language and quite a banal topic of smell of steaks in passageways. And notice the sibilants there with the S's, and it moves into the 6 o'clock and smoky days and gusty showers. And that S sound continues the whole way through that stanza. And the sounds of the words themselves created by that sibilance hint at the fact that we are talking about the smell and not the real life object, which is interesting because when we have Rhapsody, we have the smells and the objects that are both talked about but they both give us a sense of death. And so, but here with these smells, it's about the perception. The S sound gives the sizzle. We smell it, but it's not there. It's similar in lighting of the lamps, smells of beer, and vision of the street, and the notion of something. The real thing's not there. It's not present. You have the gusty shower raps, the personification there, and the showers beat. There's that musical term, the beat, the meter of the words. It's in tune with the title, and when we are reading it orally, the word shower raps actually sounds like rap, as in the music. And so even the rain is a perception of drumming. It kind of also links to Rhapsody with the beating of the fatalistic drum, that musical beat. And if we draw the two together, is there something fatalistic about this particular scene, this particular night or evening that we're looking at? Gusty as an adjective is about strong wind or building up of emotion there. So we are building emotion as well as the weather building. Burnt out, withered leaves, vacant lots, they all create the imagery of emptiness. And the burnt out ends of smoky days suggest cigarettes, possibly even a fire. And smoky as well suggests pollution. Is it a reference to the Industrial Revolution? Does it carry on from Prufrock and the fogcat that was previously spoken about? If it is a reference to the Industrial Revolution, it both represents the active production of it by city occupants at the same time as looking at those very same people being the ones who suffer. That idea of industrialization is then emphasized by chimney pots. And is it smoky from the chimney tops? Is that what's happening? But we do get a sense of reduced visibility, and that reduced visibility matches the limited perspective of the persona. Then it talks about your feet. Is it the presence of another person, or is it the persona taking an outside look at himself? Like Prufrock, we're talking about people in fragments. We cannot take in the whole. Like in Prufrock, continues the feet, the hands, the masquerades, the short square fingers, the eyes. Again, it's all about these dismembered parts and this brokenness that pervades his poetry, particularly his earlier poetry. The broken blinds as well. The alliteration of the B sound. Does it match the persona's limited perspective? Is he partially blind? Or is it some type of metaphorical blindness, people who can't see the truth or the true reality? Broken also supports the idea of seeing people in fragmented parts, again similar to Prufrock. And the grimy scraps of withered leaves. It's an interesting syntax there. Could it mean printing and ink? A depreciatory term for newsprint, or the headlines that manipulate the reader's view? Back to your feet, scraps. The ink comes off the scraps of paper, which implies that the person addressed literally leaves their the person addressed literally leaves their footprints on the street, carrying the grime with them. Is it a metaphor for the passers-by writing an urban text? Again, linked to that polyvalent feet that press in the next stanza. A lonely cab horse steams and stamps. Is it cold? Is it keen to walk on? Is it impatient? Impatient to assume the world? But written in simple present tense, indicating a repetitive movement. And so it's in this cycle that keeps moving on, and yet at the same time it does not move at all. And so we get this sense of inertia. Stamp, again, could also mean print letters on something. Postage. Again, we get this